Hi, it's me, Dex Gelfand, developer and practitioner of therapeutic spiritual counseling, and I make a video from time to time to share what I've learned, enlightenment, training, information, perspective, understanding, and this particular video, what I'm talking about is the effects of having gone through shocking experiences and how these cause us to substitute an altered version of ourselves, which I commonly use the word persona or identity, but you could say an altered version of yourself. And the reason you do that is because you don't feel that you can experience presence, like being fully present, and the presence of what's in yourself and the presence of what's in others. And I've seen this happen so many times, it's becoming clearer and clearer, because we do a lot in this work of therapeutic spiritual counseling, of untangling, deconstructing these projections of altered versions of self, identities, or personas. And I'm seeing more and more how frequently these are born out of having been immersed in something that's just such a feeling of shock. Something that without these techniques you have no way of truly overcoming. So there's a constant effort of a coping mechanism, a way to try to hold down that terrible feeling of shock so that you can feel functional and okay with and around others and yourself. And it's just emerging more and more that these unresolved feelings of shock from experiences that have shocked you are maybe a leading cause of how you work to submerge yourself and show a different face, an altered version of yourself, to try to fight that or hold that down, resist that terrible feeling of shock. You know, I know that there are therapies and techniques and methods to try to help people to arrive at being comfortable, to not being stressed, to relieve anxiety. And from what I see in all my life and experience, is that when it comes to things that have impacted us as strongly as a terrible, shocking experience, leaving that feeling of shock of that experience within us, the two main results I see from existing therapies or practices is either to be in a forever working on it in therapy session after therapy session. I'm working on it. And trying to attach to that working on it a feeling of hopefully I'm making progress. And then so many of my clients have been through the Scientology experience, and I can tell you that Scientology system does not have within its capacity, within its menu of processes, what they call its bridge, its grade chart, as it's called. There is nothing in there specifically designed to resolve something of the intensity of a moment of shock. There's nothing that's likely to accomplish that. One would think and hope, if you're indoctrinated in the process, then you would try to have faith that Dianetics, with recounting and processing incidents, could resolve it. But I've seen from too many clients who've been through the Scientology process that what they learn to do is to tell themselves it's resolved, or to kind of go into hopelessness that it will truly ever be resolved. And act in a different way to try and not expose the shock. I tell you many stories, but I do know that in Scientology, a long time ago, L. Ron Hubbard recognized there's something called the moment of shock, but he never said he had a specific technique for that. He seemed to kind of imply that maybe that was something Dianetics resolved in what he called engrams, but I also saw where he had said in his technical bulletins, stay away from moments of shock. Wow. What kind of system or therapy says stay away from something disturbing, don't try to process it? And yes, I did read that in a Scientology technical volume. So what I see happens there is you will process some feelings about the feeling of shock. You will superficially address related moments of shock, of incidents, but not likely very successfully, because I've had so many clients who immersed themselves in the Scientology experience for decades and hundreds of thousands of dollars, ostensibly progressing up the levels of Scientology, but very superficially and going in directions other than truly addressing the things that cause people to adopt protective ways of being, coping mechanisms. I think of one particular client who came to me specifically to try and address and resolve a altered version of himself that he found himself going into that was offensive to people. It was even offensive to his wife, and they both recognized that he fell into this self, this persona that was not easy to deal with and unpleasant and off-putting. They even had a name for it. And this client had spent over $300,000 in Scientology and had gone up through the upper confidential, secret, advanced, what they call OT levels. And surprise, surprise, nothing in all he did really resolved this unfortunate, distasteful way of being. And the reason I bring this up is because when he came to me for that, and we started addressing that, what emerged was that he'd had not one, but two very shocking experiences, and a truly shocking experience, what we call a moment of shock. It stays in you actively forever, running in the background, causing you to act certain ways, to expend a lot of energy trying to not be present with it, be somewhere else, be something else, resist that feeling and be artificial and an altered version of yourself in the process, just an ongoing wrestling match, which consumes great amounts of your mental and spiritual energy. And the two experiences he had were when still a teenager, just months apart. One parent died and then the other parent died. And again, through all his Dianetics and Scientology, no doubt these things came up, but there was nothing, no technique that existed within that catalog that would truly resolve that. They were not difficult to resolve. I have the technique for resolving, a technique for truly resolving moments of shock. And over the years, I've improved upon it, made it more efficient, and maybe even more successful. I would call it 100% successful. And, anyway, when this particular client, we took care of that, and it created great change, and that altered way of being, that offensive, off-putting, kind of obnoxious self-attitude that would arise within him, it was gone. And he was so much happier and more comfortable with himself. And I do remember that 3 years later, he sent me a message over email just to say, I'm still better. I'm still changed from that processing, from the sessions we did. And that way of being is still gone, never came back. I'm still grateful and happy for how I am now. Thank you. 3 years later. So that's an example of what a difference it makes. And again, the main point I'm making in this video is maybe all of us, and probably all of us, have adopted altered versions of ourselves, protective ways of being. Well, we've all done that, but I mean specifically triggered, provoked, inspired by feelings of shock relating to terrible moments that shocked us, that more or less forced us into expending a lot of anti-self energy, presenting an altered version of ourself to try and hold down our inner feelings of shock. So to me, it's of great importance to just be aware, to understand what a driving factor that is in us. Moments where we were shocked, we felt completely helpless and overwhelmed and unable to be present, unable to feel okay and function. So much so that we're driven to force a lot of energy into a pretentious way of being, a protective way of being. And it's just a fantastic relief and change. My clients talk about feeling serenity, feeling so much relief, having a wonderful, to use a term, a feeling of ascension and a regained sense of feeling like myself again after God knows how long. So just be aware, of this driving factor of terrible moments of shock, how it's always active within us, and how therefore our resistance to it in taking on a false attitude and way of being is active, and how wonderful it can be so that we can fully process this, digest it, resolve it, truly get through and over it for real, so that it's no longer present. I'll be happy to help you with that, and I'll be happy to help train anyone who would like to do the same for others.